The closing manager, Diane, placed a firm hand on Annika's shoulder, her voice dripping with fake sympathy as a police officer loomed behind them. Annika, a college student working her very first job, felt her world collapsing. She was being accused of stealing $100 from the register. As Diane pointed to the empty cash drawer with manufactured certainty, Annika's mind went blank with panic. She couldn't find the words to defend herself against the very woman who had trained her just weeks before. The fluorescent lights of the Health Right pharmacy hummed with a cold indifference. Annika could feel a dozen pairs of eyes on her, the last few customers, her co-worker, all watching as her life unraveled right there at Register 3. The police officer was a mountain of a man, his expression unreadable. Diane explained the situation in a calm, practiced tone. "We reconciled the drawers for the shift change," she said, her hand still resting on Annika's shoulder like a lead weight. "Annika's is exactly $100 short. I'm so disappointed." The performance was flawless. She sounded like a heartbroken mentor, not a cold-hearted executioner. Annika tried to speak, but her throat was tight with unshed tears. I wouldn't," she stammered, the words dissolving into nothing. The officer finally spoke, his voice low and firm. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me." The sharp click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound Annika had ever heard. The walk through the store was a blur of shame. Every aisle felt a mile long, and every curious face was a silent judgment. She had been so proud of this job, her first real step into adulthood. Now she was being paraded through it like a common criminal. At the police station, the brutal reality of her situation crashed down on her. She was fingerprinted, photographed, and placed in a small, sterile holding room. She tried calling her parents, but their panicked confusion only deepened her despair. They were good people, but a lawyer was a luxury they just couldn't afford. The weight of it all was crushing. When a man in a rumpled suit entered the room hours later, she barely looked up. He introduced himself as Alistair Finch, her court-appointed lawyer. He looked tired with deep lines etched around his eyes, as if he carried the weight of 1,000 lost causes. He sat down and opened a notepad. "Okay, Annika," he said, his voice raspy. "Tell me what happened, everything." Annika just shook her head, staring at the scuffs on her shoes. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "She's the manager. I'm just me. No one is going to believe me." Alistair sighed softly. He'd seen this before. The resignation of the innocent, trapped by a system they didn't understand. He tried again, asking gentle questions, but Annika had shut down. She gave him clipped one-word answers, her spirit completely broken. To her, this lawyer was just part of the machine, a man who would eventually advise her to plead guilty to make it all go away. She felt she'd already been tried and convicted in the store, and there was no fight left in her. Alistair left the meeting with a heavy heart, feeling like he had failed before he'd even begun. But something about this case just wouldn't let him go. Back in his cluttered office, surrounded by stacks of files, Alistair couldn't shake the image of Annika's defeated face. It wasn't the face of a defiant thief. It was the face of a terrified kid. He requested the official discovery from the prosecutor's office. He read through Annika's employee file, glowing high school transcripts, a scholarship to the local community college, not so much as a tardy slip on her record. It just didn't fit the profile of a girl who would throw her future away for $100. Diane's story was too clean, too simple. And Alistair's decades of experience told him that simple stories were often the most deceptive. The centerpiece of the evidence was the security camera footage. The prosecutor had sent over a digital copy, a single file showing the view from directly above the registers. Alistair leaned back, watching the grainy, silent movie of Annika's world falling apart. He saw her count the drawer. He saw her go on her break. He watched as Diane stepped in, handled one transaction and then closed the register. Then Annika returned and finished her shift. It seemed to prove nothing and everything all at once. It showed Diane had access, but it didn't show any money being taken. Frustrated, Alistair watched it again. And a third time. He was about to give up when his old eyes caught something. He leaned closer to his monitor, replaying the exact moment Diane was at the register. There, a flicker. It was almost imperceptible. He isolated the section and played it frame by frame. For one single frame, the digital timestamp in the corner seemed to blur, and the reflection of the overhead lights on the register skipped, jumping in a way that defied the laws of physics. It was a digital hiccup, a tiny flaw in an otherwise perfect lie. It wasn't proof of theft, but it was proof of something. A spark of hope ignited in him. This was the first thread he could pull. He called the prosecutor, a young, overly confident lawyer named Davies. Davies was dismissive. "A glitch, Alistair? That's what you're bringing me? The girl has no alibi. The manager is a respected employee. Just take the plea deal. It's a misdemeanor. She'll get probation." Davies saw the case as a quick win and was uninterested in a worn-out public defender's conspiracy theories. Knowing he'd get nowhere with the prosecutor, Alistair decided to do some old-fashioned legwork. He went to the health right and spoke to other employees. Most were tight-lipped, but one young man, a stock boy named Kevin, looked visibly nervous when Alistair mentioned Diane's name. After some gentle coaxing, Kevin pulled him aside in the stockroom. "Diane's been complaining about being broke for months," he whispered. "Her car got repossessed last week. She's been really stressed." He agreed to give an official statement about her financial troubles. It was a huge break. But the hope was short-lived. 2 days later, a frantic Kevin called Alistair, his voice trembling. He was taking it all back. He said Diane had waited for him after his shift, cornered him by his car, and reminded him that his mother was the lead pharmacist at another Health Right branch. She never made a direct threat, but the message was clear. Stay quiet, or your family pays the price. Just like that, his only witness was gone. Alistair was back to square one, with nothing but a single flickering frame. Alistair knew he was running out of time. The prosecutor was pushing for a trial date, and without a witness, his glitch theory would be laughed out of court. There was only one move left, a long shot that depended on a favor and money he didn't have. He called Lena, a freelance digital forensic expert he'd worked with years ago. He explained the flicker in the video and his gut feeling that the file had been manipulated. Lena was expensive, but she was the best. Alistair promised to pay her from his own pocket. Her task was to get a warrant for the pharmacy's original master server, not the copy sent to the police, and find definitive proof of tampering. It was the final test. Lena dove into the store's system. Within a day, she called him back. "You were right," she said. "The video file the cops have was edited. It's a clean job, but the metadata shows it was altered on the back-office computer about 10 minutes after the alleged theft." Then came the knockout blow. "But that's not the best part. Your manager is sloppy. She edited the clip, saved a new version, but she never emptied the computer's recycle bin. The original, unedited file is still here." The next day in the judge's chambers, Alistair, Lena, and a smug-looking Mr. Davies gathered to review the new evidence. Lena played the original footage on her laptop. It showed Diane approaching the register, looking over both her shoulders. Then, clear as day, she opened the drawer, slid 2 $50 bills from the stack, and slipped them into her vest pocket. The room was silent. The prosecutor stared at the screen, his face pale with shock. The evidence was absolute, irrefutable. It painted a picture not of a thieving teenager, but of a desperate, calculating manager. The charges against Tanaka were dropped that afternoon. An internal corporate investigation moved swiftly, and 2 days later, local news cameras were waiting as Diane was escorted out of the Health Right in handcuffs, her face streaked with tears of shame and disbelief. Faced with a massive lawsuit, the corporation offered Tanaka a generous settlement. A year later, the timid, frightened girl from the holding cell was gone. In her place was a confident young woman walking across her college campus, a law textbook tucked under her arm. She had not only cleared her name, but had found her calling. She became an intern at a legal aid clinic, the same kind that had given her Alistair. She spent her afternoons helping people navigate the terrifying legal system, giving a voice to those who, like her, once felt they had none. She had been rescued from the edge, and now she was